My name is Alisa. I have Dean Rob Schwartz of UCLA Law School with me. I see a Catherine in here and a Natalie in here, as well as Anna, our LSAT Unplugged admin member. If anybody has any technical difficulties, please feel free to either speak up, you can write in the chat, or you can DM Anna at LSAT Unplugged team. That's what she's there for, to help with any technical difficulties. If you have any questions about the recording coming up later, please feel free to reach out to her. Anyone in the room as well, please feel free to write in the chat if any questions you have for Rob comes up at all. If you would prefer to stay anonymous, you can DM me and I'll work it into the conversation, hopefully gracefully. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm glad everyone's here on a Sunday late evening or early evening, depending on where you're at. My name is Alisa. I am an LSAT Unplugged consultant, also a TA. The biggest difference between that is consultants have email addresses. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me at admissions@lsatunplugged.com. I've been a course member for about 8 months now. I'm an applicant for the fall 2022 cycle, which feels funny to say, but I bet it'll creep up sooner than later. And I'm happy to introduce Dean Rob Schwartz. Rob Schwartz joined the UCLA School of Law in October 2006 after serving for 11 years as the Dean of Admissions at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law of Yeshiva University. A 1992 magna cum laude graduate of Cardozo Law, he practiced for several years before entering the law school admissions profession. Rob has been an active member of the Law School Admission Council, LSAC, serving on several committees, including the Services and Programs Committee, the Annual Meeting and Educational Conference Committee, the New Admissions Personnel Workshop Committee, most recently, the Secretary of the Board of Trustees, also for LSAC, and is most currently a member of the Current Assessments Committee, if that's correct. Welcome, Dean Rob, and I'm happy to have you tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. Nice to meet you.
We're really excited to have you here. So I'll go ahead and open the floor. You've got quite a background in admissions and you've spent quite a while in admissions. I've heard an earlier interview with you with Steve Schwartz, where you mentioned that you've seen the transition from people that were admitting, writing applications, maybe by snail mail, over to the internet. I don't mean to put you on blast like that, but yes. I'm just excited about your time working at admissions. Can you tell us about your role for UCLA Law and maybe what lured you into that or what brought you to that role?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again. And, I've been doing law school admissions, gosh, it's a long time, since 1996. And I initially got involved in admissions work actually prior to going to law school. I worked in undergrad admissions. I enjoyed giving tours of my college campus. And then after I graduated, instead of going to law school, I decided to take a job as an assistant director of admissions. And I think I always just enjoyed, getting to know prospective students and helping them make what is a very important decision about where they want to spend either 4 years in college or 3 years in law school. And to this day, I enjoy that kind of work. My role at UCLA is to oversee the admissions office and the process. So everything you might imagine that entails, from speaking to prospective students, reviewing applications for admissions, also overseeing the financial aid process, things like that.
Now, it's my understanding that you've also served as, is it the director for the financial aid department of UCLA School of Law? I believe that's from a 2011 interview. So have things changed since then?
Well, yeah, I never really worked in financial aid, but I help oversee the financial aid process, and the financial aid staff work very closely with me and with the admissions office. So I oversee admissions and the financial aid offices. I don't think things have changed dramatically, other than, unfortunately, law school getting more expensive. The understandable importance of financing legal education is very important, obviously, to prospective students.
Right. Thanks for bringing that point up. I know that that's something I absolutely want to talk about tonight. I've been a course member for 8 months, but I've been on a law school application journey for a lot longer than that. And of course, there are social media platforms, there's Reddit, there's a lot of information out there. And I personally feel a collective creep of fear sort of surrounding the law school cost and as well as what's sort of how it's going to be impacted maybe with COVID-19.
Mm.
I think what I'm about to say is absolutely not new, but I'm going to go ahead and just reference that typically it is consistent that when there is an economic low or an economic dip nationally, there's been a pattern of a rise in applications, not just for law schools, but also for graduate programs. You've seen this happen before, though, with the 2008 cycle, where there's a rise in applicants, and maybe it created a bottleneck effect for 2011's job market, maybe those people coming out of the market. Seeing that, then, what sort of financial advice or what can an applicant be doing before they even get an acceptance to a school to sort of help their financial situation?
Well, I think there's a lot. I think first of all, just researching law schools and considering a wide range of schools to give yourself a lot of financial options when you're admitted, so that you'll have a range of choices that you'll be able to make. And there's a wide range of ways that schools give financial assistance, but there's both generally speaking, both need-based and merit-based aid. And a lot of the merit-based aid is going to be tied to entering credentials. It's not all about that, but a large part of it. So I think just doing your homework, researching a wide range of schools will help you be in a position to make some good decisions about how you want to finance your legal education. Also, I think for people interested in going into public service, researching loan repayment assistance programs can be very, very valuable as well.
That's a fantastic point that you bring up about the repayment options for someone working in public assistance. And it's my understanding there's a lot of research and a lot of resources to be seen in that. I also want to point out that you mentioned that financial aid can be both merit and need-based. When you bring up the need-based and talk about credentials, what do you mean by credentials?
Well, with need-based, again, it's going to vary school to school, but generally speaking, schools are going to look at your income and your assets. And in some cases, if you're of a certain age, the income and assets of your family, your parents or significant others. So tax returns, things like that. On the merit side, by credentials, what I mean is largely undergraduate grade point average and LSAT scores. Those are going to be important factors, if not the only factors, important factors in the amount of scholarship assistance that a school gives out, right? So generally speaking, if your grades and test scores are significantly higher than a school's medians, you can expect a higher scholarship award. If it's lower, you may not get as much merit scholarship assistance, but if there's need-based aid, you may get significant aid if you qualify on that front. So just doing your homework and thinking about that, talking to people at schools, looking at the ABA 509 reports. If people haven't seen those, I think that's a great resource to compare schools, get a sense, for example, of many different things, but on the financial aid front or scholarship front, what percentage of the student body is receiving a scholarship? What is the average scholarship award? What is the 25th percentile, the 75th percentile? All of that information is in the 509 reports.
You bring up a really great point about just doing the homework on the 509 ABA reports. I'm just going to keep that in the back pocket of mine and just kind of consistently bring up. I know that there's a lot of talk about different resources and this article said this and this article said this, but it's just such a great reminder that that has really valuable information right there. Speaking of percentages and financial aid, in 2011, you mentioned in an interview that as many as 40% of your applicants received a application fee waiver. Is that number pretty consistent for these years? Is that changing?
I would say I'm actually surprised to hear that was a long time ago now, so that seems low to me. I
Oh,
would say it's
wow.
probably a little bit higher. We offer both need and merit-based fee waivers too. So what I would say to anybody, basically, if anybody is feeling like applying to the law school is going to result in some sort of financial hardship, they should be in touch with our office. That's what I would encourage them to do.
Fantastic. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think it's really great. And what I'm really hearing from that level and amount of even application financial aid is that UCLA is really prioritizing an inclusivity and in terms of really accepting people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. I'm going to ask you one more question about the waiver.
Sure.
When, and you mentioned anybody should be sort of in touch with your offices. How early should someone be asking about an application waiver? As they're applying, 3 months before? Is there sort of a timeline that someone should be worried about or thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a general matter, it's always good to apply as early as you can in the cycle, especially cycles like we're seeing now where there's record numbers of applicants. So I would say getting in touch early in the process, either late summer, early fall, early September, after our application process opens. We have detailed information on the website on how our fee waiver process works. But if anybody has any questions about it, they can always reach out. It's generally a pretty liberal policy. We do a lot of recruiting events, either in person or this past year on Zoom, and people that attend these events we've been able to provide fee waivers too. So it's not hard to be able to do that.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that question. If you hear my dog growling, please just let me know.
I don't actually, but good to know.
Okay. Okay, good, good. That's not my stomach. That's a small furry animal.
Oh,
So, talking about finances and someone really doing their homework, sort of like creating an informed applicant and somebody who's informed about going into law school. Transfer students. I honestly did not even realize I'm a first generation, would be a first generation law student. So it wasn't until I was doing my research for this interview that I even realized that it was a possibility to transfer to UCLA School of Law. And it's my understanding that that transfer happens after a 1L year, and applications are sometime in between, if I'm right, April and May is when someone would be applying. Would that be a good option for someone really watching their bottom line and creating a plan for student loans?
that's a hard one. So just to say, so generally, yes, you apply as a transfer student after the first year. The timeline is the application opens on May 1st. So you would apply anytime between May 1st and really May and June is the typical timing. One of the downsides to applying and coming in as a transfer student is that there are, at least at the current time, there is not scholarship assistance available. Okay, so from that standpoint, it can be expensive. On the other hand, anybody who's interested in transferring, we'd be happy to put them in touch with current students who have transferred so that they can get some information on what, from their standpoint, why they did it and what the pluses and minuses were.
Sure.
Many students that transfer in are giving up a scholarship at another institution to come to UCLA.
Thank you. Thank you for just clarifying that. There's a lot of information, so I'm grateful to just have you right in front of me and it's sort of being like clearing the air in terms of what that means, the pros and cons of potentially somebody transferring. Now, you mentioned the earlier the better, and I know that UCLA Law has an early decision program. We're also seeing a rise in applicants. For some reason, in my mind, I've sort of concluded that that means more people would potentially be on the wait list. Am I wrong in deciding that? Is it more people on the wait list or just overall more maybe flat out rejections?
So in terms of this cycle, yes, I would say both. There are unfortunately more people that we had to deny admission to, and there's definitely more people on the waiting list as well. And that's just a function of, we had a 33% increase in applications this year. So the law school received close to 8,000 applications. We're looking to bring in a similar size class as we always have. So just by the math, that means unfortunately more people on the waiting list, more people that we unfortunately cannot admit.
That's good to know. In terms of an early decision and financial aid, it's my understanding also that if somebody does take an acceptance from early decision at UCLA School of Law, they are asked to maybe withdraw their applications at other schools. It's sort of an ask and a commitment. I've heard also just around the grapevine that there's potential to, if you get a certain scholarship from one school, you might be able to take it to another school and say, hey. With that being said, I'm also aware that UCLA does, it seems, tend to have more financial aid to give. It seems like they are very rampant and very available in terms of giving financial aid. If somebody does an early decision binding process and they withdraw, they don't have that sort of other scholarship opportunity. What are some pros, though, to maybe doing early decision?
Sure. So well, I just want to clarify that at UCLA, we have two kind of binding early decision programs, and they're very different. One actually is called the Distinguished Scholars Program, and it's a full tuition scholarship for all 3 years. So there you're really not giving up that ability. In other words, you're saying, hey, if I get admitted to UCLA and I'm given full tuition, I know I would like to go there. So yes, you're giving up the opportunity to hear from other schools. So that's something you really need to think about. But from a financial standpoint, you can feel pretty comfortable because that's going to significantly limit your debt. Now, the other program is the exact opposite of that, where you're not going to qualify for any merit scholarship assistance. And it's not a function of because you're not admitted to other schools. I mean, you know that up front. So you really just need the decision about whether or not to apply early decision to UCLA, or in my opinion, to any school, is a big one. And you really need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And you need to be perhaps somebody that's not as concerned about the debt level that you're going to accrue, especially if you're applying to our other program where you're only going to be eligible for need-based aid. So if you're in that situation, the advantage is perhaps a little bit easier admissions process, right? Less people applying. And so your chances of admission may be better. But what you're giving up for that then is likely significant scholarship assistance. So it's a small number of people that do it. And for anybody considering doing it, you really need to think about it. And you can always attend one of our information sessions and talk to an admissions advisor to find out if what you're thinking and if it makes sense for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sort of clarifying in terms of ED, early decision, and scholarship and financial aid. I've been in a lot of money conversations about that lately, and I can just see from your answer right now that it seems so personal that I would almost go so far as to say that in a big open group, not everyone is going to maybe like walk away, especially with just like sort of think tank and applicants. It seems like the right way to sort of approach that very important decision is to just meet with an admissions officer or go to an informational maybe like Zoom, which I know that UCLA offers. So thank you so much for shining light on.
I agree. Sure.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move around to a little bit something more fun, or I think is more fun. If finances are fun to anyone, good for you, because it should be. It's really important and responsible part of the application process. But something that I really like about UCLA is its location in Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, and I can only speak from personal experience, but for me, there seems to be a collective, maybe like a global mindset that maybe attracts people to Los Angeles. I don't know if it's people globally minded are going to LA, or I don't know if LA are attracting people that are globally minded, but that part's not important. In terms of UCLA School of Law, it seems like has a huge range of course offerings and a really informed faculty. I also see that there's a lot of guest speakers. Would you say that the guest speakers help to maybe connect and network UCLA students of law? Is it more of just like an inspirational opportunity? What can someone expect from maybe like the wider range of guest speakers that the UCLA School of Law attracts?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I think that especially this past year in the age of COVID and everything being virtual, we've been able to have even more guest speakers, because I think in the past it was always, nobody would think about doing things that way. It was always, we had to get somebody in person. So now we don't. So we've had a wide range of people from all over the country, and they don't have to fly here. The benefit to the speakers, I mean, first of all, we have about 60 different student organizations, in addition to all of our centers and research centers and specializations. And so between all of these programs, they put on so many events. There's sort of a running joke at the law school. You never have to buy yourself lunch, because these programs put on lunches and you can go every day of the week and hear from different speakers. And the benefit is, I think one of the hardest things about law school beyond the first year is what to take in your second and third year. And you mentioned that we have so many courses, and there's clinical programs, and you can study abroad at one of our partner schools, or do an internship, or an externship, I should say, either part-time or full-time. There's so many things you can do. And so, um, using law school as an opportunity to better figure out what you want to do. Some people come in having an idea, what they think they want to do, but they need to find out for sure. And many people change their mind. So going to a school where there are a lot of programs like that, and where you can hear from a lot of speakers, is very helpful to you to figure out your career. I think it helps both in terms of networking, but also just in terms of finding out about different areas of the law. And we have about 18,000 alums, and a lot of the people that come and speak are alums, but also they don't necessarily have to be our graduates. There are people that we bring in, lawyers, who are in a wide variety of careers, whether our graduates or not, that are going to provide a lot of good information for our students in a wide variety of areas of law.
I'm going to underline the fact that you said 18,000 alums. That is quite a lot. And also in my research, I've seen that there's alumni from UCLA School of Law practicing in all 50 states in some way, shape, or form. Clearly, when somebody like me looks at that, I see the value in maybe having the potential and the flexibility of going many different places, and there will be an alum there. So that's really exciting, and I hope people are paying attention to that number. I know that they are. You speak about the up to 200 plus course available, in the second and third year of law school. Again, as somebody who would be a first generation law school, in terms of finding out and figuring out, are there student affairs committee members or somebody that could help guide and figure out what courses do I take to leverage that level of course size?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources that are available to students to help you select. And the Student Affairs Office absolutely does academic advising, formal academic advising. We also have two different mentorship programs, and a student mentor program and an alumni mentor program, where you can get advice. And then, of course, people just speak to their faculty members who they really enjoyed having and ask them for advice. And I should mention, since you mentioned first gen, we have a first gen student organization that provides a lot of support to our first gen students. They can serve as a resource too, because they have their upper level students who have gone through this process. So the resources are there for you to get the help. You just have to ask, and it's definitely not a time to be shy. You want to reach out and get as much advice as you can, and then you make the best decisions for yourself.
That answer just like rocked my world. Thank you so much for explaining that, because I've heard a lot about the course offerings and what happens at UCLA School of Law, and it felt almost naive to say, is there someone to kind of help me talk about that? And the plethora of options that you just offered is really exciting. And you know what else I've also heard about is that UCLA has an orientation course. It lasts 1 week. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Yeah, we call it Law 101. So it's a great resource. I wish I had that when I was in law school, right? I just showed up for contracts or torts on the first day. And this gives you a week to really learn, the way I say it, how to do law school. You're going to, in small groups, learn from our professors what the first year is all about, how to read cases, how to prepare for class, how to brief cases, how to participate in class, right? And at the end of the week, you even get to take an exam, and get those exam jitters out of the way. And it's just a pass-fail class, so it's sort of low pressure, but a great way to be introduced to law school. And what we have found is that our students feel so much more prepared, and the faculty, the other first-year faculty, find that once they're able to get going a lot quicker, because students are really ready to hit the ground running. So it's 20 hours, I believe, of instruction. Just a great introduction to school.
Wow. Can I ask, does that happen in the summer? Like maybe like right before 1L?
It does, yeah. What we do, like this year, for example, we start on August 12th, which is a Thursday. So we have a 2-day orientation program. And then the following week, Monday to Friday, is that Law 101 class. And then your other classes begin the following week.
You know what I think you've brought up, that it may be if somebody is first generation like me and just getting new to the law school application process, of course, you want to be concerned about like how to perform, once you get to LA, 1L. Law school is a big investment of both time and money. And something that you just brought up is the exam at the end of the orientation, type of course. And what I've learned in my research is that it's possible to go through a semester and only have one, at most maybe two exams. Exams are not typical, and they play a really large role in your law school education. So to take, it's not a mock exam because it sounds like it's a pass fail class, but to have the opportunity to learn how to take an exam before maybe potentially at the end of your first semester, when it really could have a large impact on potential summer internships, 2L job opportunities maybe coming up in 2L. It sounds like that could have a really big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is it's not the only opportunity for that. So that's one, but we also have an academic support program run by Professor Pavel Wansowitz, where you will also have other opportunities to learn how to do exams, so you're going to have that opportunity in that first course, and you'll get some feedback there. But you're also going to have opportunities from him on exam taking skills and things like that. And it just actually tomorrow, two faculty members are putting on a session, how to take 1L exams, tips and strategies, right? So for an hour tomorrow night, our 1L students are going to have that. And I think that, there are many different opportunities at the law school to get this kind of support. It's not just all sink or swim. And so again, it's all optional, but I think if you can avail yourself of these resources, you'll find it helpful.
You are really changing a perspective that I just had with a friend of mine who's also applying last night. We're kind of winding down the week and just talking about schools and our research and things that we've done so far. And something that comes up, it came up in that conversation, but it comes up a lot, is I do better in a smaller school, or I need something smaller so I have more personalized support. But something I've learned about UCLA from the School of Law is that class sizes are on the smaller size. They do have smaller sizes. You mentioned the many institutes and organizations that you have. It's my understanding that the Promise Institute for Human Rights also offers one-on-one student counseling. Everything that you just mentioned right now, it sounds like if somebody who really has their heart on a certain school, but thinks that they do better in smaller environments, it might not be an all is lost moment. Of course, that you have to be able to advocate for yourself and maybe take initiative in those needs. But I do hope that everyone who's applying for law school is taking initiative and advocating for themselves. But it sounds like you've really talked a lot about a topic that are not showing up in my conversations, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I would just say for people that are looking or interested in class size, those ABA 509 reports is a great resource, because it will tell you, for example, how many classes the school offers after the first year, and then how many students, for example, how many of those classes enroll less than 25 students. So like I was just pulling ours up, and there were 215 course titles at UCLA beyond the first year, and 151 of them, so more than half, had under 25 students. So the size of a school, the sheer number of students that are coming in, isn't always an indication of what the class size is going to be like once you get there. What you also want to look at is how many courses are offered, and what's the enrollment like in those classes.
Wow. If anybody did attend a larger undergraduate school and they're looking for a smaller class size, but maybe they haven't felt that, I can personally give my 2 cents and say that I went to a very small undergraduate program. There's about 40 of us that started out in my major, and I believe about 15 of us that graduated. And under 25 is very personalized. It is very small, and it's a very unique and conducive to like a challenging learning environment. And I personally loved it. So if you don't know what that number feels like in an education setting, it's really fantastic. And I can't believe that over 150 course offerings. It's really a blessing to hear. I think when somebody is maybe looking at a larger school, they see that large course number, maybe it can feel overwhelming, but the resources that you've just mentioned have been really incredible. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And I would just also say, wherever you go to law school, take advantage of the faculty, and get to know them. Go to office hours. Don't be shy, and just take advantage, because it's just an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, and you brought up earlier that you've been working in admissions for so long because you've really enjoyed it. So it seems like faculty, they like what they do for the most part. So go ahead and leverage them for that. So sort of moving on to the application itself, kind of doing things backwards here, but I hope that everyone's still with us. Please feel free to write questions in the chat if you have any. It looks like we haven't gotten in any so far. So I'm going to dive right into the application itself. I have a lot of questions about it. UCLA, I think, is incredible in that it offers a lot of, not a lot, but there's quite a few essay prompts, even specifically for certain programs, the Epstein program, public law and policy program. If you do want to study in that requires a separate essay for entry, but happy to talk about that in just a moment. My first question is the character and fitness addendum. Again, I'm in a lot of conversations, just like fly on the wall in a lot of different rooms. And there has been, I think, a general confusion. I'm hearing one thing in terms of, if anything's happened, please disclose it, because it's only going to it could potentially cause you trouble down the line after you've gotten your law school education when you're trying to take that bar. I'm also seeing a few different things. So say one prompt might say, were you convicted? And a person was not convicted, but maybe there was some criminal or probationary behavior that happened, but they were not convicted. Are they out of integrity? And I know this is a really specific question, but that's why I'm in front of you right now, to ask just more specific questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to be very careful, right, with these kinds of questions. My best advice to people is you've got to read the application, the question, very, very carefully. You're absolutely correct to say that these questions are phrased differently, and part of that depends on the jurisdiction where the school is. But the bottom line is, if you really have a situation where you're not sure, my best advice is you can either talk to somebody like myself in the admissions office, but depending on the question, we may just suggest that you consult an attorney, because as you say, the biggest problem that we see with this is not somebody not being admitted because of what they disclose, but the failure to disclose. And then it's a real problem 3 years down the line when you're applying for admission to the bar. They do a full background check. They see something on your record. You did not provide it. And now the school is faced with a real dilemma about, why didn't you disclose this on your application? And so you just most importantly don't want to be in that situation. So that's my general take on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that. And again, pointing people to admissions officers and maybe getting them out of that like room coffee talk, and just kind of just going on in, pull yourself up and reaching out to people. I mean, anybody listening right now, Dean, Rob is very easy to talk to. So I highly recommend it. So another kind of moving on in terms of the application, what's the general attitude of UCLA School of Law towards the LSAT score? How much weight does it hold?
Well, what I can't say is that there's no formula to any of this, right? And you probably have heard this word a lot, the holistic review of applications, which is really what we do. The LSAT is an important part of the law school application process, but it is not the only factor that we consider. Before I answer your question, I should say you mentioned all the questions on our application. One of them is there anything about your standardized test taking history that you want to share with us? So if you're not traditionally a strong standardized test taker, if, for example, you took a standardized test like the SAT or the ACT and it didn't predict very well how you would do in your undergraduate performance, that's something you can share with us. Or if you took the LSAT multiple times and you want us to put a lot of weight on a higher score, maybe you weren't feeling well on the first test, whatever it is, if there were circumstances there, we absolutely want to know about that. So I just want to get that out of the way. In terms of the factors that we consider, I mean, we need to admit people that we think are going to succeed at the law school. And what the LSAT does is it gives us some sense, some predictive sense of how somebody's going to perform in the first year of law school. It is not designed to predict how you're going to perform beyond that. It is not designed to predict what kind of an attorney you're going to be. So it is one factor of many that we're going to look at when we're making these admissions decisions, right? So traditional measures of academic ability, your grades and your standardized test scores, whether it's the LSAT or the GRE, those are things that we're going to consider. But we also recognize that other factors and attributes are going to contribute greatly to somebody's ability to succeed. So, for example, economic, physical, other challenges people have overcome, the rigor of the undergraduate educational program, the letters of recommendation that you have sent in, these are all important. We also place a lot of emphasis on socioeconomic disadvantage, any work experience that somebody has had, community or public service, career goals, the ability to contribute to our specific programs. You mentioned the Epstein program, you mentioned the Promise Institute. Those are two examples. There are many others. Our programs and specializations, there's a question on the application about that. Are you interested in any of those? And how might you contribute? Any leadership ability that you've demonstrated, any unusual life experiences. I mean, our goal is to try to admit people who are going to make a distinctive contribution to the law school and to the legal profession. And we also want to bring in a class of people who are very different from one another, right? So it's important to us to have diverse viewpoints. We want students from all backgrounds to come. So, I can't say that the LSAT is, 34.7% of the decision, right? Because it's just not. We don't do things that way. We are reading applications, and we might choose in any particular file to put more or less weight on any of these factors. So I'm going on, but that's my relatively brief answer.
Please, everything you're saying, this is maybe the most in-depth answer to this question that I've ever received, and I'm very grateful for it, because what I hear you saying is how prioritized diversity really is at UCLA, and how many different factors can go into it. I believe her name is Kate. I could be getting her name wrong. Please correct me. She's the director of the Promise Institute of Human Rights. And I was listening to her speak, and she mentioned something about needing at times a creativity when it comes to imagining political policy. And when I heard that word creativity, it really sparked kind of in me of what you're saying in terms of how many different factors you really walking the walk in terms of when you say it's holistic. I'm really hearing you on that. You brought something up about the standardized tests earlier on, and it actually I had a question for later on in the interview, but I don't want to forget it. And I really think it's important. And it comes about with students with disabilities. As UCLA's School of Law, what sort of are there plans in place for students with disabilities, maybe pre-COVID, and were there any new ones put in place during COVID?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there certainly is support for students who have disabilities, both through what's called CAE at UCLA, the Center for Accessible Education, and then also through our Office of Student Affairs. So basically what I say to anybody coming in who needs any kinds of accommodations, we reach out to them if it was disclosed on the application for admission. But even if it wasn't, I encourage students to reach out to my office before they get here. We can put you in touch with the student affairs staff, and they can give you more information about resources they have, as well as refer you to somebody at the Center for Accessible Education. But absolutely, we are prepared for that. At the law school, we also have a student organization, the Disability Law Society, and one of our student edited journals is in that area of law as well. So I think there's a lot of support for students who want to get into that area of law as well. We also offer a course in disability law too.
Wow.
And
Wow.
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I have to say about that is just wow, there are a lot of opportunities not only for disabled students, but it sounds like for students who want to work in disability law as well.
Absolutely.
So sort of talking about that application, and I'm happy to circle back to the disability conversation. I think it's absolutely important and something that's been on a lot of people's minds, especially with the switch to online learning. So thank you for that. Still talking about the application, you alluded to it in terms of how many different essays and prompts there are in the UCLA School of Law's application form, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the personal statement. You can't have a law school admissions interview without mentioning the personal statement.
Sure.
I've heard you before mention that somewhere in an application, it's nice, but also generally helpful, and I don't want to say required, but it would be generally beneficial for someone to somewhere in their application mention why law school, maybe potentially why UCLA School of Law. There's and for those of you who are not familiar with the essay prompts, we keep talking about like the programmatic contribution essay prompt that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of that is it's an essay where if you know that you want to study in a specific program for UCLA School of Law, you can write an essay on how you might imagine yourself contributing to that program. Does that sound about right for that essay?
Absolutely. You got it.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. So you've mentioned before, again, getting back to the personal statement, that somewhere in the application, it's great to mention why law school. It's my understanding that that can be achieved if one writes the programmatic contribution essay. Would you say, that's it, that's good, you know, that will suffice in terms of mentioning it somewhere? Or does a personal statement, a good one, generally have somewhere in there maybe alluding to that fact of why law?
Yeah, so great question. I have said this before, and one of the things I've realized is, and that I always want to emphasize when talking about personal statements, is how important it is to be that this can vary from school to school. A lot of things can vary from school to school, and this is one important one. So it's very important to read the detailed instructions. And there are people on admissions committees that I've heard speak on various panels at other schools who say that's not important at all. So, it really can vary. For us, though, somewhere in the application, you are applying to law school. We do want to have some sense of what this is about. I've read very interesting personal statements and stories about people, but then I get to the end and I think to myself, why did I just read that? What is the point here? Because we are trying to make a decision about admission to the law school. So we're trying to get a sense of how people, why they're doing this, and why do they want to go to law school? Why are they interested in law school? I mean, I suppose we could presume that they are because they're applying to law school, but it's helpful to us to have some sense because, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to bring in a very diverse class. We want people from a wide variety of viewpoints and backgrounds and interests, which will hopefully make for a more interesting class. So having some sense in the application, it's not always possible for people to completely have their whole career mapped out, nor should they. But there's something that's gotten you to this point. There's some reason why you're applying, and it's helpful to us to know. We want to get to know that. So yeah, you could do that in the programmatic essay, and not do it in the personal statement. I just think it should be somewhere in the application.
It's great to hear this. I've seen a lot of application essays because I've been in the application journey for quite a while, and I've come across the issue of maybe a casualness of sort of like maybe language of like maybe the essay ends like wherever I may go. And we've had dialogues of terms of like, well, it seems pretty casual because you're applying to this school, so maybe you don't want to talk about like wherever I land. Like you can be a little bit more forward. I really like what you brought up earlier in the interview, mentioning you don't have to be shy when maybe stating your intent or asking for help or generally just engaging is what I'm hearing, like engagement and applicating, made up a word. Applying to a law school is engaging with that law school. explicitly. So it's okay to sort of mention it. It's not like a mouse or a thought in the question in the corner. I have a question.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
I have a question in the chat. I apologize about that. I'm just so excited to be speaking with you. So I have a question in the chat, and it says this. Have the admissions received a lot of social justice themed personal statements? If so, what advice would you have to applicants speaking out about social justice? I imagine that especially with the cultural sort of, I don't want to say shift because the work has been being done by many professionals in the field in terms of social justice, but there's been a shift maybe in like a general public mindset in terms of social justice. So what would be your advice? There's a two-part question. Have you received a lot of essays about that? And what's your advice to applicants?
Well, the first part is easy to answer. Yes, we have. But I don't, maybe I'm reading into the question. I don't think that's a reason to avoid talking about it. And this raises a larger issue, which is you should be yourself in the personal statement. If you are yourself, and if you're not ultimately admitted to that law school based on something you write, my feeling is then maybe you don't want to go to that law school, right? I mean, you want to find a good partnership. So you want to be yourself. Now that doesn't mean just say anything that comes to mind, right? We can talk more about strategies and all this, but you want to be yourself and you want to share whatever is bringing you to law school. And if that's to pursue social justice, by all means, you should talk about that. But we certainly have seen an increase in people discussing that when applying to law school.
I have a follow-up question, but I'm going to ask the second one in my mind. So maybe I should ask, maybe what are some don'ts or what are some mistakes if you are writing social justice? And I assume that if you are writing an essay about your call to social justice, that you're being authentic to yourself, you really care about it. So if those steps are already there in place, what have been some of like your most common mistakes, or maybe what you don't do?
Yeah, well, what comes to mind when you ask it the question is not so much about a mistake in writing about a particular topic like social justice. I would just say it's more general mistakes. And this, I think, surprises people, but we see a fair amount of errors in personal statements. And you really need to take the time, do a few drafts, have somebody help you proofread it, because you've read it so many times. It's so important to pay attention to detail, both in terms of the requirements of the statement, but then just in terms of the grammar. Or what sometimes we'll see is somebody writing a statement and then saying at the end, and these are the reasons why I want to go to, and they mention the name of another law school besides UCLA. And, you may be sitting there thinking, why do I need to hear this? I'm not going to do that. But every year, many people do it. And sometimes even worse than that, they'll go into depth about why that other law school is where they want to be. And it's easy enough to do, right? You're applying to a lot of schools, uploading different documents, but you just want to take your time and make sure you get that right. And enough people do it every year that I think it's important enough to mention it. It is the most common mistake that I see every year.
Thank you so much for answering that question in terms of, it's interesting because the question that I got in the chat did ask how would an applicant stand out when writing about social justice, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, I almost feel that you've answered it in terms of genuinely being oneself. That is the best way to stand out. And I actually really appreciate you bringing up the point in terms of the risk one takes in writing about different schools. And when you bring up that someone has maybe even gone into depth, I sort of just feel this is a lot of hard work. Applying to law schools is a lot of hard work. And so if I were to feel that it's not going to happen to me, there's just really too much at stake here to entertain that thought, is what I'm picking up from you, because I've heard it before. People say to me, and I felt it too, like it's not going to happen to me. Something really interesting, and I hope everyone takes this away too, and I'm just going to give my example, is that there's spell check, but if you spell a word correctly and it's not the correct word, it's going to be harder for you to find. And it's happened to me, and I've seen it in other essays as well. So really like the point that you bring up, and where it's still happening. It happens a lot, and to just, take it slow, take it slow and be thorough.
Right. I would say keep in mind the personal statement. There's really two things, two things we're trying to get out of it. One is your writing ability. Lawyers write, so we do want to have a sense of that. And then the other is to learn a little bit more about you, and how you've gotten to this point, why you're applying to law school, and what you've achieved and what you hope to achieve.
Fantastic point about that. I love that you bring up the writing point. We have another question in the chat.
Okay.
It's a question for Dean Schwartz. Is it okay to express interest in a particular part of the legal field in the personal statement, is where we assume this is happening, that the school doesn't have an explicit program for?
Sure. I don't see why not. Again, I think what's most important is just being yourself. I mean, presumably you have an interest in us or whatever law school you're applying to, since you're applying. And I guess I would want to know, most schools, even if they don't have a huge program or a huge specialization in an area, they're going to offer something, unless it's a really unique area, right? So absolutely, I think you want to be upfront and honest about your interest. I think it's unlikely that you would ultimately not be admitted to a school for the sole reason, or even partly because of that.
Yeah, I'm thinking already off the top of my head, there might be a delicate balance in terms of where you make it clear that you know which school you're applying to. So it doesn't look like maybe you're talking about a program, and maybe an admissions committee member is going, do they know where they're applying? Like, we don't have a specialty in that, but maybe there could be a balance in where they're talking about that that's where they're looking into going into, and maybe they're interested still in the school. And both can happen in a good essay. It's all about execution and being a good writer, as you mentioned, but it sounds like it's possible.
Absolutely. Totally
Nice.
agree.
Okay, great. Well, we have just a few minutes here. I'm going to leave space open in the chat. I just have one more question.
Sure.
And it's just really about the admissions process, in terms of, like, there's been you said 30% rise. It looks like over 8,000 applications. What does the application, what does it look like? Somebody reviewing an application, maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. How many eyes, get on it? How many people are looking at it? What's happening to our applications once we apply?
Yeah. Yeah, happy to answer that. I always think when I get these questions, though, about what's most important from the prospective student standpoint, and
Right.
I think that if you do your homework right and you apply to a wide range of schools, you're going to end up with some great options. But to answer your question, I would say that it varies considerably at UCLA, but at a minimum, at least two individuals are looking at each application for admission. But there are some instances, for a wide variety of reasons, why there might be more people. You mentioned the Epstein program, just as an example, where maybe a whole separate admissions committee is looking at that file, or maybe the a number of people on the admissions committee want to look at a particular file and discuss it for a wide variety of reasons. Could be a character and fitness issue, could be other issues. Maybe it's there's a wide range of possibilities, but at a minimum, I would say at least two.
I think it's great. I think it's a great point that you bring up in terms of what's really priority, in terms of what an applicant does really need to know. And I really appreciate that you brought up that point in terms of where maybe our focus should really be. And it's our application. And you've also mentioned, that there could be more people looking at specific program contributions. And it's my understanding that that could be faculty that work specifically in that program. And maybe perhaps like student involvement. Is there still, maybe if they can offer some insight maybe here or there? Is that still happening?
Yeah, over the years, it's varied. There have been years where there's been more student involvement than others. And part of that depends on student interest too. But we have utilized students in both on the regular, for lack of a better word, regular admissions committee and the Epstein admissions committee.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for answering those questions and just kind of hanging tight with us. I believe that that's all the questions that I have for tonight, and I want to value your time. Is there anything that you'd like to share? I know that you mentioned the event happening tomorrow is for 1Ls.
Unfortunately, that's just for one else, but I just was giving it as an example that you will have that kind of support. I guess what I would say is, I realize how hard it is for people now in the middle of a pandemic to be researching law schools, but we offer virtual tours of the law school. And so, following those are led by students generally, although in the summer it's our staff, but encourage you to find out more about us that way, or if you're hopefully when times improve and we can be back in person, encourage people to come in for a personal visit if you can. It'll be interesting to see, maybe after this, one result of this pandemic will be, we haven't discussed it, but maybe we will always be offering virtual tours. So if somebody isn't going to be able to get to LA, at least they can find out a little bit more about the school. So encourage people to do that, and then ask your individual questions of us afterwards too.
I think it's a fantastic idea, to still offer virtual tours. You can't quite feel the breeze of West Los Angeles, that the weather offers, but I think that's absolutely incredible. That reminds me, is there a way for applicants to get in touch with like students, maybe have informational interviews with them? Is their best bet to join in on informational sessions?
Exactly. Yeah. And our students generally give the tours, so you're going to get to meet some that way, but our office can also put you in touch with other students in a particular area if that's something you're interested in. And once you're admitted, we have a formal ambassador program where you'll be assigned a current student to speak with and get some more information from them.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I know it's been a Sunday evening. It looks like we've had quite a few people in the room with us. I see Anna wrapping things up. This interview will be published on YouTube and socials. Rob, do you want to leave your email for anyone if they want to get in touch with you at all? And also it's on the UCLA School of Law's website.
It is. Do you want me to put it in the chat or just say it? What would be best?
Go ahead and say it so that then and or chat, but then anyone listening in.
Yeah, so it's really just my last name, Schwartz, SCHWARTZR at law.ucla.edu. If anybody wants to follow up or set up a virtual tour, happy to do that. Appreciate you guys having me on tonight and asked a lot of great questions, and good luck with your own journey. It's exciting.
It's really been exciting to have you, and I can't thank you enough for answering in depth a lot of the questions that I've had, whether you've answered them before countless times. I've listened to a lot of interviews of yours over the past few weeks, and
sorry about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I actually learned new things tonight and got new information, so I'm hoping that anybody else can grab some information too. And I really appreciate you, and LSAT Unplugged thanks you, and I hope you have a great Sunday evening.
You too. Thanks for asking such great questions, and good luck everybody, and stay safe.
Thanks.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.